Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Friday Society. I'm here today with Sarah Kiernan, who is on the leadership team at SolidCore. I know it probably seems like this is a SolidCore podcast by now, what with Anne and Ryan and now Sarah. It is not. I am just obsessed with you guys and the way you run companies, and you're just all amazing people. So, welcome to the
Thanks so
show,
much.
Sarah.
Thank you so much. We will turn this into a SolidCore podcast any day.
Right. So, what is your current role at SolidCore?
Sure. I'm the vice president of people and talent.
Amazing. And we
Yeah.
connected back in the day at SoulCycle.
hmm
What was your journey like when you were at Soul?
Yeah. So at SoulCycle, I think it's so funny. Every month, I'm like, what was that? I finished. I finished my career as the senior director of instructor talent and internal partnerships. There's something with instructors and talent, or just talent management and
Yeah.
internal partnerships, and it had been like an evolution, essentially, that had kind of always overseeing the instructor. So whether it was actual programming, putting them into classes, doing the schedule, evolving into overseeing a team that did that, more business strategy. And then internal partnerships was really the collaboration between instructors and other departments, so that I was acting like an agent almost for them. So with the marketing
Mhm.
team, which you were on,
Yeah.
I would provide the talent for marketing initiatives. As we started exploring digital with SoulCycle, I would cast and lead and drive the instructors to move towards digital. But I actually started the first year that I was at SoulCycle, I was the executive assistant to Julie Rice and Elizabeth Cutler. So we had that's like my little known, that's how I got in there. I was their executive
Didn't know
assistant.
that.
Yeah, it was actually for less than a year. We had a solid 8 months before,
Wow.
I got pushed over to go back to working with talent, which I had been doing
Wow.
previously in my career.
Yeah. I remember just having I remember being in your office every now and again, and you would be getting text messages from instructors that were like wild of
Yeah, yeah,
they
yeah.
were stuck on
I
the
lived in the
subway.
asylum. I lived in the asylum for years, and we to this day, my friends, I'll forget about it. You just like move on in your career, you evolve, you grow, you do new things. And I think, unlike, I think a lot of people tend to hold on to the best or like certain points of their careers. And
Mhm.
for me, I'm just pretty good at, like, it's like water, I just flow through it. But yeah, I remember I was dating someone at the time, and he was like, yeah, I remember how, we would wake up at 3 and 4 and 5 in the morning, and you would have to get on your computer. And I was like, oh yeah, that I do remember that. Actually, he was like, we would have to sleep in separate rooms,
Oh,
because like when I like people called at 2 or 3, if were teaching at 6 a.m. and they needed a sub, it
yeah.
was a pretty wild time.
Yeah. So how
Yeah.
many studios were there? I mean, granted, it probably went from like 5 to 80 during the time that you
Yeah,
were there, but
it was.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I started at 12. There's 12
Wow.
studios. I think we had just gotten Greenwich open, or Rybrook. So yeah, there was like 12 or 13. And then I think I left right as we were approaching that 90 ceiling. So like right at
Wow.
the end. Yeah. So
Wow.
it was a journey. It was a
Yeah.
journey. And it's
Well,
funny because
you've got a crash course in like expansion.
I did, and we're exactly in that place at SolidCore. Though I came
Right.
in, SolidCore had already had way more significantly when I came in. But I just feel like my life's journey over the past decade
Yeah.
is just watching buildings open.
I love that. But I remember when I
Yeah,
was chatting with Brian and he was like, I don't even know how many we have coming up because we have so many coming up. And I was like,
yeah.
that's
There's
great.
there's a lot. I tend to focus on areas. So I'm like, I know we
Mhm.
got California, we have the West, some
Yeah.
Texas, some Colorado. So but I have to admit, I also have lost track of the sites and the exactly wheres. And our development team is
Yeah.
incredible, and they know all that stuff. So I focus on regional areas.
Yeah, I love that. I know this is a little off topic. Can you explain why there's been no solid core on the West Coast? Because I've tried to explain this to a lot of people and they're like, I don't understand the Legree license and all that kind of stuff. Like, can you fill people in?
Yeah, I actually can't. I wish that I could. I have less insight into that,
It's
truthfully.
like
And
it's a
so
crazy mystery with this like Legree license.
yeah, the Legree license, I wish, and I probably should be more informed about the Legree and SolidCore, but I actually am not. So I wish
Okay.
that I could be the person who could answer that for you, but I would probably give misinformation to your listeners, and I don't want to do that. I do know that for us, this is like a delayed open, like this, we would have been in California already, and we were gearing very much towards that the year
Yeah.
that COVID happened. So I think
Yeah.
that it was the West Coast is a natural progression for any company, and I think that SolidCore had a really great focus on these smaller markets that were underserved as far as boutique fitness. So I know
Yeah.
that it was a priority where we kind of hit the Midwest, the Dakotas, like some areas that were historically underserved. So
Yeah.
I know that that was the focus and that the West Coast was a natural progression that was coming for us anyway. And so
Yeah.
COVID slowed it down, but could not stop us. So
I love that
uh,
though.
I'm
That's
thrilled,
it
and
is.
we're
Yeah.
thrilled for the West Coast.
It's a really cool strategy too, because I feel like most strategies are always like large cities and then
Mhm.
trickle sort of into the suburbs. But I know, I guess because Anne is from North Dakota, right?
Mhm. She is. Yep,
I love
she
that.
is. And I was not at the company at the time, so I can't speak for her or the company when to say what drove the specific Dakota decisions. But I do know that it was very much the ideal of the company of there's so much space in these markets that is untapped where we can really
Yeah.
get in there and create community and create a brand and have our brand be in places where other brands do not exist, right? And
Yeah.
so and I know we've seen like some great impact, some not so much, but like we have seen some really excellent impact in a lot of these areas. I always joke one of the Lexington, Kentucky, we opened in, and they
Wow.
love SolidCore, and it's an
Yeah.
incredible community. They're very, very strong. We've had really, really strong leaders come out of Kentucky. We've moved
Awesome.
team leaders from Kentucky to DC to be more corporate leaders. So we actually,
Wow.
I'm like, who knew Lexington,
Yeah.
Kentucky would have such strong people and really effective leadership. So
Yeah.
yeah, truthfully, I think it was a really interesting strategy, and needs to continue to evolve as the world evolves, right? And
Yeah.
so, but it has been an interesting strategy.
Yeah, and I know that everybody listening is going to appreciate that as a strategy too so much because I've gotten a lot of messages from people that have just said, like thank you for talking about studios in places that are not New York and California. Like if
Sure.
they were like I have a bunch of studio owners in, like Rhode Island and Chicago and I mean not really Chicago but like outskirts and all these places and they're like we don't want to be excuse me, like we don't want to be like in LA, New York City studio. We want to be our like little small town studio. And it's nice that we can just like do that. So I love
Sure.
so much that you're like breeding great communities and great leaders from these like outskirts places.
Sure. Yeah. And we're all connected through the major cities too, right? So
Mhm.
they get to really see culturally who we are in DC, culturally who
Yeah.
we are in New York, in these bigger
Yeah.
cities as well. So I think it's really it's an interesting model. It brings interesting challenges, but also like really fruitful
Mhm.
challenges as well that make us think differently as leaders for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, two things that I really want to talk to you about, and I know everyone really will get a lot from, is what you just said of like internal hiring and internal
Mhm.
promotion, I think is really
Sure.
massive and something I know that you're really passionate about like, developing people. And that's
Mhm.
absolutely something I want to talk about. And then I also want to talk about managing instructors, which I know you have so many years of experience. And
Yeah.
just making sure that you're doing the most that you can to be nurturing your instructors to be the best they can
Mhm.
be. Because I
Sure.
think, and this was something we talked about a lot at Soul Cycle, was like everyone can do everything perfectly, but your instructors are still the product. Like that
Sure.
is still the 45 minutes that people are paying for. So even if you're doing all of your marketing is great and all of your advertising is perfect and everything is really working at your website's great. Everyone's like super easy to book class. If they walk into class and your instructor is not great, it's done. Like
Sure.
that's the end of the line for your company. So I
Sure.
definitely I don't want to underestimate how important your experience is and how I'm just so excited to be talking to you because it is like it's so important to sort of chat about how you make your, not how you make your instructors great, because, they're either inherently great or not, but how you
Sure.
sort of like pull the greatness out. So
Yeah.
that's definitely something I want to chat about. But, let's start with the internal promotion sort of
Yeah.
thing. So
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about, how you handle that stuff at SolidCore, what you do to like nurture performance reviews with your
Mhm.
managers, and like sort of just what that looks like at the company.
Yeah, sure. So SolidCore is, it's a really interesting company and so different, especially when we dive more directly into instructors. I have like a lot of very different comparisons between SoulCycle and SolidCore, but I think with SolidCore, what's interesting is that they face the same kind of opportunities and but also strengths as other fitness companies in that people are inherently motivated, right? People who work for companies that are fitness, they're inherently motivated both physically because they want to work for this kind of energetic company that's based around the body, but also these fitness companies are startups. So it takes inherently a motivated person to want to work for a company where you work around the clock, and really try to drive and build and open 197 studios in 5 minutes, So I think that we're lucky that we have these people who are built of the stuff that we're looking for. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, internal promotions is such an interesting thing to explore, especially as a people leader. I oversee HR and then I oversee talent, which is also more of like the brand, the workout. But you want to elevate your people, right? Like that's what keeps people motivated. That's what makes people want to work and grow and build a company. But you really do have to balance it out with needing external talent as well, right? So I think some companies, especially fitness companies, we get in this place where you start as a coach and you do everything right. So you're a manager and then you do everything right. And then you come to corporate, you do everything right. Next thing you know, you're senior vice president, CEO to the world, and you've been with this company for 6 years. And so much of the growth is based on like the employees' hard work and their knowledge of the brand. But as you know, there's 100 fitness companies out there right now, right? So knowledge of your brand is incredibly important. That brand loyalty, ownership, and knowing everything about who you are is important. But
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally, innovation is what's important, right? A different way of thinking is what's important. So you really have to balance wanting to recognize talent and grow it, but you need to make sure that you're growing it with a lens around new ideas and not
Mm-hmm.
just people who are incredible at executing the ideas that have always existed.
Mm-hmm.
So we are really at that point at SolidCore, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
we have really talented team members. We have really junior team members who, managers, people who this might be their first job out of college, people
Yeah.
who I cannot say enough how smart the people who work for SolidCore are, more than any company I've ever worked for. Just
Yeah.
really, really smart people. And so people who you want to see continue to grow, but you want to make sure that people are really developing and honing in on those basic everyday leadership qualities, the ability to give feedback, the ability to receive feedback, the ability to look at everything through the lens of the business and not through your own personal lens. Those are
Mm-hmm.
real leadership qualities that I think it's my job to inherently make sure we are giving to our team members, which could take a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years
Mm-hmm.
to really dive in before you're promoting people and elevating them to a place of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it does a disservice, right? When
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
you throw a director title at someone who hasn't quite managed the art of direct communication, right?
Yeah.
And
a
so
hundred
um,
percent.
yeah, so I think that's something that we, myself, and I know the rest of the leadership team is really mindful of, right? Is making sure that we find ways to celebrate our talent, to recognize, and to give other opportunities that don't have to do with, a completely straight up the ladder promotion, right? So whether it's,
Mhm.
hey, why don't you go take on this other studio? Why don't you try to grow these other coaches? Just trying to find opportunities for people to elevate their leadership skills before we elevate their title.
Yeah. And I love that you use the idea of just getting somebody into a different studio, because I
Hmm.
feel so much of what you learn, you feel like you've got everything down pat in your four walls.
Sure.
And then you can go to another community or a place where, the clientele is slightly different, and everything you knew about your client's behavior totally changes. So that's
100%.
such a great idea for sort of getting people out there. But, you know, I think
Sure.
I want to go back to what you said about learning how to give and receive feedback because
Hmm.
it's you're inherently, honestly, once you're done, once you've mastered that, you've gotten rid of your ego, which
A
is like,
hundred
you
percent.
know, the biggest thing that any human being can really do right now is just be like, you know what? It's not about me. It's about something else. And I remember when I first started working at Lululemon, I was 21. You know,
Hmm.
I was like, I don't, what do these words mean? Like, what do you mean personal integrity by like
Yeah,
blah, 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 you know? And then
sure.
I like will never forget after a year, I was like, whoa, I think the way I speak is completely different. But it was
Hmm.
just because that's how feedback conversations were pushed within the
Hmm.
organization and in a good way, not in a way that was ever like pushy, but in a way that was
Hmm.
really encouraged. So, how do you how do you make sure that because not like that you're pushing it on people, how do you make sure that feedback conversations are being learned in a way that serves the organization?
Yeah, I think listen, you can train people on feedback, you can have all of these traditional paths, but I think it's really feedback is learned from watching people who do it really well. So for example, for myself, I will like roll out a policy with my team. I'll say like, this is what we're doing. I'm like, how do you feel? Do you like that? Like, do you hate that? Like, why do you like that? You know, so, and that's not, you wouldn't be like, oh, that's a feedback conversation, but like you ask the right questions, right? You make people critique what you have said critically. So I'll say, you know, I'll say, this is how I think we should do it. Does that make sense? How else would you do it? Like, do you think that's smart? You know, so that's with my own personal team, how I start building that culture is that whenever I, you know, give a directive or lay out a goal or lay out a plan, really bringing people into the conversation, that's feedback in itself. I think I never want to equate anything to age because I don't think age is important, but I think younger people at the point in their career when they're like just about to take off, they're starting to develop. They're like, well, I think we could do it this way, and like, you know, why are we doing this? And they start to really get like passionate about ways of operating and about ways of leadership and about team members. And I see so much passion out of kind of our, you know, our more junior directors, our senior managers, and I hear a lot of it between each other, you know? And so my challenge is like, well, have you said that to that person? You know, and like, so that's a question. And I'll give an example. Recently, you know, someone who works for me came to me and said, oh, you know, I heard some feedback about someone on our team from this person. And, you know, they were very, you know, kind of upset and felt like they should be doing this and this and this. And I was like, well, what happened when they said it to them? And she was like, well, no, like they wanted me to like report it to you. And so and Brian Myers and I actually like he has called this out quite a few times, and he and I are really aligned on it of like a culture. It becomes a culture of tattletales instead of like a culture of people being able to say things to people's face. And so and but you can't say things to people's face without trust, right? So we really my goal is to make sure that we have a company where people trust each other, they trust their peers, they have great relationships, they understand who each other are as people and human beings and not just as coworkers, so that that trust is there, so that when you push someone gently to share their feelings with that person directly, there is a level of trust and people can receive it better, right? So
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
really what we try to do at SolidCore is make sure that that relationship is so tight between everyone at all levels in the company. You know, I did an exit interview the other day, and she actually said something that was so important. It was the best feedback that I had received. And, you know, I was like, how do you feel about any sort of flags on HQ initiatives or anything the leadership team has rolled out? Just asking her about feedback on leadership in general. And she was like, well, you know, it's really interesting. Every single member on the leadership team, there's 7 of us or 8 of us, and um, she was like, you're all so different. And we can, as people, she's like,
Mhm.
looking at you, like the 8 of you could not be more different.
Yeah.
We're incredibly diverse, both in like
Yeah.
gender, age, life experience, business experience. Like we're a very, very diverse team.
Yeah.
And she's like, so whenever you guys roll something out, I'm pretty sure that it has been challenged on 8 different fronts. And so, and I thought that was so poignant that she would like notice that. And it's
Yeah.
true. So for us, like I think the leadership team is constantly asking the questions of each other, which is an
Yeah.
indirect way of feedback, right? Asking each other questions, asking each other to go in deeper, go in harder on policies that we're rolling out, the way that we're leading our teams. And so, because we do that, people have a lot of trust that when we
Mhm.
create a policy or we send something to the rest of the company, people understand that it's probably been vetted pretty significantly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and because they understand that it's a place where you guys have conversations in the room that they know that they have full trust that like there will be very honest conversations. Like when you encourage honest conversation in the organization, they know it's happening on all different levels. So
Sure.
I think that's so important. And then it's such a good reminder. Because like Lululemon was very similar, where even if you were saying the nicest thing in the world about someone, still every single manager would be like, nope, I'm going to shut this down. Like, I'm not okay with this conversation. Like, this needs to go to the actual person instead.
Yeah.
And it really just trains your muscles on being able to say to people, like, hey, this is what I think about something that's happened. This is how it's affected me or whatever. Like, even if it's great feedback, we're just
Yeah.
not, I don't know. I feel like we just don't get in the practice of just direct feedback that often. So it's so important that you guys have that reminder all the time.
Yeah, and we also, the way I always phrase it to especially more junior team members is whenever something happens, I'm like, would somebody be surprised by that? So when something comes to me or it comes to my people business partner or my people manager, and it's whether it's a performance management issue or they want to promote someone or do something, I'm like, would this come as a surprise to them? Would they have any idea that this is wrong or that this is a pattern or that this is something that we've experienced or that they have this reputation? Like we get a lot of people who are like, they have a reputation. And I'm like, do you think they know that? And if they don't, it's really our team members' obligation to make sure that they know that long before they're ready to action on it.
Yeah, that's such a good question.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about instructors
Okay.
and hiring good instructors and firing not great instructors and the whole shebang. I have
Sure.
many private clients right now that are struggling with getting great talent.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if you guys are seeing the same thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like something like someone who's a listener of the podcast literally messaged me the other day and she was like, can you get on and just talk about how we need fitness instructors in the industry? She was like, I teach at 4 studios and I'm so tired. Like, can we please get some better instructors going on?
Yeah.
I
No,
guess.
we certainly were struggling as well,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
find. For us, it's not. I think she was specifically saying good talent. Like I think we were finding like talented people for sure. It's our volume, right? We're expanding. We're opening 6 new studios in a period of 6 weeks. Like that's just a lot of people. In California, we're opening 2 studios in January. So we just sent out, I think, 24 offer letters, so it's just a lot of need for talent. So, and it's competitive, right? There's so many studios. So the more competitive our industry gets, the harder it is. And I think SolidCore's, our struggle to find people is just based on volume alone. I think we actually have a really approachable system for getting talent where it's really open for a lot of different people who might not otherwise explore a career in the fitness industry. We have a really comprehensive training program that teaches people. Coaching SolidCore is very hard. I am a coach myself, and it is very, very hard. And so, but our training program teaches you how to do it. And we have really great follow-up with coaches to make sure that they continue to remember how to do it and do it well. So I think for us, it's a volume concern, but I think in general across industries, there's two different things, right? I think a lot of people, especially in hearing you say like good talent is, I always joke, I'm like, it's a triggering thing. Everyone's good. You just have to develop them. Because fundamentally, and I'll start with like SoulCycle because that was, I was definitely more hands-on. Obviously I worked directly with SoulCycle instructors, where now I oversee people and strategy in general. And so I'm less day to day with our actual coaches in that process. But with Soul Cycle, we always joke like it would take people, and same now, 18 months to get good, right? And nobody looks good on a bike the first couple times that you do it. So it's really hiring talent's about vision, right? It's not about finding a unicorn. It's about vision of what somebody could become and what is special about them. And I think I said this, before, but it's about the personality and it's about the person and it's not about anything else. And I think, you can, I was joking with LA. I'm like, well, everyone knows LA, like you have to be gorgeous, you have to be this, all of these things. And that stuff is true. Like there are vanity metrics, especially in fitness. Like people want aspirational bodies and people, there's like the token like hot woman, hot male instructor that people are attracted to. So there is some, level of those things that don't feel good in the world, but they're just the truth. But it's so minor in comparison to the traction that someone gets when they're good at connecting with people, and so you could be gorgeous, have an aspirational body, listen to great music, and have zero ability to see a human being for who they are and to connect to a person. And that person is never going to be successful. And I'll say for the most part, the people who are unsuccessful at Soul Cycle, and I saw a lot of unsuccessful instructors, and it was never about their looks. And it was never about their ability to make a playlist. It was never about their ability to ride the bike, right? It was about their ability to not get past their ego and just connect to people. Or as people who did not feel like they could look at people in the eyes and like make a connection and ask them their name and talk to them and like really build a community. So
Yeah.
that was fundamental. And then on the contrary, I saw some incredibly successful Soul Cycle instructors who, like, if you saw them on like a piece of paper, you would not even believe that they even worked in the industry. You
Yeah,
know what I
I was
mean?
gonna say that. I was like, there were a few Soul Cycle instructors that you would never assume were cycling instructors, let alone, like, and I
Well,
just
a lot of them
remember,
looked like they couldn't
yeah,
even ride a bike,
right, yep. But
and
they
so
had ridiculous followings, waitlisted every single class.
yeah, so but those were people who made people laugh. A lot of them were people who like would after class like send notes and follow up with people, and like they would create like there was one instructor who had like a whole like spiritual circle after classes on Sunday where like people would come together and like send love and energy to people and people would say what they were going through, and it was like very AA, which it's a little controversial, but it felt like an AA meeting
I can't
after
wait for like the 5 messages I know I'm gonna get from people being like, I know what instructor.
I know, but but it was important, you know what I mean? Like people go for the community. And so I think that it's about hiring is about vision and not about what you see in front of you. You know what I mean? It's
Yep.
about like what this person could become. And
Yep.
it's about once you have them, staying close to it because there's a lot of people. And even at SolidCore, like speaking as someone like I said, who coaches now too, like it was kind of a joke for me at first. And I could barely get through class. And but I like to think I'm good at connecting with people. And so I have like a little bit of like a connection with the people I've built now. And this is not obviously what I do for a living. I just coach a couple times a week, but I've been able to make like an impact and like make people feel seen and like have a little bit of community. And I used to teach in the mornings, and then when I started, like when the morning sickness really took off, I had to pull out. And from the mornings, and now I teach in the afternoons. And I just saw someone on the street from like my morning class, and she was like, I think about you and the baby. How are you? Like, it's a connection,
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
And so if
Yeah.
I can do it from where I started from, like you can really grow anyone's talent. So like, and if my talent as a coach could be grown, anybody's can. So
Yeah.
I really think it's about having that vision, and then once they're in, staying super, super, super close to
Hmm.
not just the high successful performing people, but the
Hmm.
people who have potential to do so.
Hmm. Yeah,
And I think that's where
absolutely.
at Soul Cycle there's challenges because the focus was always on like highlighting and celebrating like the big talent, when the
Hmm.
reality is the big talent's always going to cycle out,
Hmm.
and you can't really, there's only so much you can do to
Yeah.
celebrate and support the big talent.
Yeah.
And so you really have to look for the next level of talent is what
Yeah.
you have to do, and how you're offering them the tools and the success
Hmm.
and the exposure, truthfully,
Hmm.
to be successful.
Yeah. And I think the point that you're bringing up of, just find someone that's great at connection is
Hmm.
the most important thing because I think a lot of the time people are like, well, my workout's really different, right? Like I hear
Hmm.
that from studio owners all over the country. They're like, well, my workout's really different. So I need someone who can do it really well. And I'm like, you don't actually. Like
Yeah,
with an operational job, even, I'm like, you don't need someone who's really good at Excel. You need someone who's really great at working with you and you can teach them Excel. Like you
hmm,
can teach skills to a piece of paper if you really needed to, but like you need to make sure that the connection aspect is there.
yeah.
Hard stop because I've been doing one of my clients in I won't name where it is, but one of my clients I went and I took one of their classes recently and the instructor that I took, it was a surprise. Like I just popped
Mhm.
in and I took a random instructor because their numbers have been a little bit finicky lately. And I was like, what's
Sure.
going on? And I felt like I had popped in headphones and I was taking a Peloton class. Like
Yeah,
it was a good class. There was never a mention of a single human being's name. There was
mm,
never any sort of, like actual modifications of anyone in the room. And there was no 15 minutes before and after hanging out and talking to people. And I'm
sure.
like, those are the non negotiables. Like, we're in a place right now with boutique fitness. Still, no one is at their pre 2020 numbers. Like, no one is there yet, still.
Yeah, of course.
And we can get there. Like, people's behavior, people are ready to get back into the studio, but their habits have changed. And it's like if we're not
Mm,
reminding people, if you're not there with the happy birthday balloons and the, whatever, we missed your birthday in COVID, we missed your son going off to college, like how are you
sure.
feeling? It's all these things. And I'm sure you, like, working with Julie and Elizabeth so closely, you're like, this is the bread and butter of a business. Like, this is what
Yeah,
you do. But it's like, I feel like we can't ever stop talking about it. But like, we are competing with every single person's at home situation. Like, you have to remind them why they're not working out at home. You have to remind them why they've gotten into their car.
yeah, sure. And I think, and also just like understanding why people want to be there, especially
Hmm.
now, because it's different than why they wanted to be there 2 years ago. So
Yeah.
making sure that, listen, there's you listed it, there's like formulaic things that people can do, right? Names, touch people, connection, talk before class, after class drive. Like those are kind of the basics of what
Hmm.
you can do to be successful. But I think it's also like having someone who's good at connection and understanding people. Like you
Hmm.
intuitively can also just know like when to leave people alone, right?
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
like they just want to come and work out and like let people have that space, and like people feel differently about things, and also different workouts are different things. Like people go to a soul
Yeah.
cycle class because there's some element of like glitz to it and this, and people want to feel celebrated and seen and all of this stuff. And like a lot of times it's SolidCore, like people come because it's like their moment for them. And so you
Hmm.
support them, you like make them feel seen, you help them in their journey and their, support them. But sometimes you leave people alone as well. So I think
Hmm.
knowing when to pivot as well. And I think
Hmm.
that even if it's not about knowing everything about each client, like I think people who are authentically themselves can make an
Yeah.
impact, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's even the instructors or the coaches that I've seen. They own their weirdness, they own their quirks, they have a personality, they share a lot about themselves, right?
Hmm.
They make fun of themselves. It's just like and they inspire people to be this kind of like authentic version of themselves, it was just
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I love that. I know. And I can even think of a few solid core coaches I know that just do that so well. And yeah, you
Yeah.
can definitely tell that's something that you guys like pull from your instructors.
Yeah, and listen, we when we hire coaches, we want people who are themselves, right? We want
Hmm.
people who are different. We hire like with a huge eye on people who are just like different. And
Hmm.
what is successful? There's no like formula. Again, at
Yeah.
SolidCore, like what a successful coach is, it's really about people who show up as themselves and continue to be
Hmm.
themselves, and people who really care about helping their clients be themselves
Hmm.
too and be like
Yeah.
better versions of themselves and really connect to people.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm curious about like mentorship programs with instructors? Because I
Yeah.
know at Soul Cycle, I can't even remember, but I think we only paired instructors with a mentor if they were like having trouble, right?
Yeah, and at SoulCycle or at SolidCore, I think it's less of a defined mentorship. I think
Yeah.
people, mentorship is a way for people to elevate their own leadership, right?
Hmm.
So we
Hmm.
have a ton of people at SolidCore who mentor other coaches who
Okay.
help grow people,
Yeah.
but they are people who are taking their own leadership in their own hands, and like they know that that is the way to elevate their self and their performance and their
Hmm.
team, and they know that like the performance of their business in general depends on everybody being great. At
Hmm.
the studio I coach at, we have a coach and she's just excellent. She's always in other people's classes. She's always hyping people up, giving feedback to new coaches
Hmm.
directly. And a lot of that, so she is a mentor to a lot of people, but a lot of that is because she continues to challenge and elevate herself to be like a great leader in the
Yeah.
company.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, so I think
Gotcha.
that's really it's really important. So we don't have a formalized mentorship, but also with SolidCore, we have a much more structured system of check-ins,
Yeah.
right? And touch
Yeah.
bases, evaluations. We have the head coach community managers who are really close to the performance of the coaches in their studios. They
Yeah.
are constantly checking in, making sure that, and then when something needs to be elevated, they're looping in their training manager. We have like
Hmm.
a big army of training managers and head coach community managers who are just really good at catching little things, constantly giving feedback, and really developing the coaches into a better place. And so,
Yeah.
listen, we have to continue to grow our resources in that area because,
Yeah.
as we talked about with expansion, that's going to be the key to making sure that our brand is consistent across the board.
Hmm. Oh my God, that's an amazing call out because it
Yeah.
is true. Like, I think so many studios are like, oh, this person graduated their program, great. And then they're done. And then it's like, we
Yeah.
don't really have to put that much effort into them anymore. And
And you do.
it's so the
Well,
opposite.
people develop bad habits very quickly,
Hmm.
and so and they can be broken quickly, but people develop bad habits really quickly. And I always say, if you just like take that minute, you
Yeah.
say, "Hey, you have this weird tick,"
Yeah.
or like you say this weird thing. Can you
Yeah.
please stop it? Like it will make a world of difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had it when I started coaching. I had a tick where I just constantly said "we." Like we're gonna do this, we're gonna plank crunch, and meanwhile I'm like walking around with a microphone, not doing anything.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, I guess it's not we, but I'm used to Soul Cycle where there's like the collective,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're gonna tap back, we're gonna do this together. It's like very tribal where solid core is just like this is about you, it's about you, your strength, your body, your
Yeah.
authenticity. Like this is, so it was just funny. Like, but so, like I remember Triana, who's on my team, but she also did my evaluations, was like, stop, you're not doing anything. I was like, okay, I hear you, I'll stop, you
I
know?
love that. That's so
Yeah.
funny. It is,
Yeah.
I mean, it's true. Bad habits, definitely. If you're not paying attention, yeah, they can
Yeah.
they can multiply.
Yeah. So,
Okay, Sarah, let's get into some rapid fire questions
okay,
before
my
we close
favorite.
out. Okay.
Hmm.
All right. I mean, this one I feel like obviously. What's your absolute favorite way to sweat?
I'd say probably indoor cycling.
Wow. Okay, you're like a
Yeah.
cardio junkie.
Yeah,
Love it.
I am. For me, I know it's rapid fire, but I want to preface it like solid core is the absolute best thing I've ever done for my body and life.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for me, I come from a place where exercise isn't something that I naturally gravitate to. And
Yeah.
so for me, I think still having some joy in it and
Yep.
like a
Yep.
little bit of like the ability to not listen. And
Yep.
like with cycling, you don't really have to listen. You can like listen to music and
Yeah.
listen to your body, where at solid core, like you have to listen to your
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I'm
they're just
I'm so
very,
with you. Yeah.
yeah, they're very different for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very different.
I love solid core. It is still every time. It's so hard.
Yeah, but you walk out fitter. I walk out and I'm
Yes.
like, I'm fit now after one
Yeah.
class.
Right.
I came back, I did my first class pregnant after like I think I was 3.5 months, and I walked out and I was like, I think I'm in labor. Like, are these cramps? And I was like, nope, that's like my muscles. Like they worked for the first time. And so it's just crazy the way you're like, oh, right, this hits every muscle in your body.
Yeah.
The first
Yep.
time I did it after a
Yep.
break, it was wild.
I love that. What is your absolute favorite song to work out to?
Ooh, um, this is so hard. I think anything by like Meek Mill.
Okay.
Hmm.
All right. Love
Yeah.
it. Software that you can't live without to do your job.
We're big for HR, big Namely user. So I think I love the Namely platform for HRIS. Like it's really comprehensive. I'm able to like see a lot of things in the company with very quick reporting.
Awesome. I've never heard of that one. That's very
Yeah.
cool. What's the best business advice you ever got?
That it's not about me. And truthfully, like working for any company, like it is not about me and my vision. It's about like how it affects the business, right? And so taking I'm a strong Aries, so like I have a pretty intense ego. So I think for me, just remembering that like it is never the decisions I make are never about the benefit to me, they're about the benefit to the business.
Oh, I love that. So good.
Yeah.
If you could live anywhere in the world that is not DC, where would it be?
New York City.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You love New York.
I
Dream
do.
job besides what you're doing right now?
Oh, I want to be a midwife in my when I'm like an elderly woman. I would like to be a midwife one day. I still think I can do it. I just don't know if my brain has the capacity to go back to school, but I always said that's like my twilight career is being a
Yeah.
midwife.
Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. And then one lesson that you took from 2020 that you want to keep with you.
Oh, 2020. That's gonna be it's hard to pull out the positive lessons. Um, I think I think just that like the ability to like pivot and do things differently. I think in my career, in my life, like I've always done things a certain way, and so they say it's hard to teach like an old dog new tricks, but I think I obviously still have the ability to pivot the way I did things personally, the way I communicated personally, and the way I worked. Obviously we pivoted our whole business multiple times, and while like quick pivots and quick transitions are not comfortable for me in solid core or in business, I think I was able to do it. So just I will keep that lesson of like that I have more capacity than I thought I did for
Yeah.
quick transitions.
Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah.
Okay, Sarah, this was amazing. Thank you so
Yeah, it was
much.
so great talking.
Where can people find you if they, want to ask you questions or take your class?
Yeah. Well, my handle for LinkedIn and Instagram and all of that stuff is Sarah K. Kiernan. So same for everything on social. And then if you want to take my class, I currently coach at 14th and U in DC, and really kind of sub all over the DC area. And I think I'll probably be on the schedule for another month or two before I step off and have this baby.
Yay. Oh, congratulations again. And
Yeah,
thank you
thank you
so,
so
so
much.
much. This was so
Yeah, it
fun.
was so nice talking to you, and I love the podcast. So looking forward
Thank
to
you.
continuing to listen.
Yes, amazing. Thank
All right,
you.
thanks, Alexa. Bye.
All right, bye. You're